welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're diving into a really mind-bending idea from a lecture by Professor Jiang Xueqin. And the big question is, can we actually use science, and especially AI, to predict the future? And maybe even shape it?
Professor Jiang starts with this really powerful quote from Dante. And the core idea here is, the future isn't just something that happens to us. It's not set in stone. It's something we can actually imagine and then fight to create. It's something we build. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the problem, this kind of bleak future we're apparently heading for. Then, we'll get into the wild solution, something straight out of sci-fi. After that, we'll see how AI fits into all this, and finally, what huge hurdles are still in the way.
All right, let's jump right in. And I've got to say, Professor Jiang does not pull any punches. He basically starts off by painting this, what he calls a hopeless, bleak, and dark picture of the world. And this isn't just his opinion. It's based on current models.
So, what does this model actually predict? Well, it's pretty grim. We're talking major political turmoil, the end of the global order as we know it, basically endless war and suffering. And the end game? Possible societal collapse, especially with climate change in the mix. Yeah, not exactly a cheerful forecast, right? Okay, after setting up that pretty dark scenario, Professor Jiang pivots. He introduces this glimmer of hope. And it's a fascinating one, because it's a concept that actually started out as pure science fiction, but now it's being looked at as a real, serious science.
This whole thing kicks off with an idea called psychohistory. If you're a sci-fi fan, you've definitely heard of this. It comes from the legendary Isaac Asimov and his Foundation books. The whole premise is this theoretical science that uses math to predict how huge groups of people will behave. And the logic is, well, it's pretty simple, really. If you can actually predict the future, then you can maybe, just maybe, control it for the good of everyone.
And here's the crazy part. This isn't just sci-fi anymore. There's a real field called cliodynamics, co-founded by a historian named Peter Turchin, that's trying to do something very similar. They're literally looking for the mathematical patterns in history, trying to figure out if there are predictable cycles behind why empires rise and fall, or why we have these long periods of peace followed by war. And check this out. One of the key theories to come out of cliodynamics is just fascinating. Peter Turchin argues that societies don't usually collapse because of things like debt or even inequality, which is what you might expect. No, he says they collapse from what he calls an overproduction of elites. Basically, you get too many super powerful, ambitious people all competing for the same few top spots, and they end up tearing the whole system apart from within. Wild, right?
Okay, so this is where it all starts to come together. Professor Jiang says, look, this is all great, but we have something now that Turchin didn't. We have a game-changing tool that could push this science into a whole new territory. And that tool is artificial intelligence. So let's clarify something real quick. When Professor Jiang says AI, he's talking about a specific thing, supervised machine learning. In the way it works is kind of the reverse of old-school programming. You don't give the computer a perfect set of instructions. Instead, you give it the starting data and what you want the end result to be, and the machine figures out the best way to get there. It just keeps trying and refining its own algorithm, like millions of times.
And for this kind of AI to work, you absolutely need 3 ingredients. First, a crystal clear goal, something you can measure, like make the most money. Second, you need clean, objective data. It's like you can teach an AI to spot a cat in a photo because a cat is a cat, but you can't teach it to find the best ice cream because, well, that's just an opinion, right? And finally, you need a basic algorithm to get it started, a sort of foundation it can build on.
Okay, so let's bring this back to predicting history. If we're going to feed data into an AI for that, what kind of data does it need? I mean, we're talking about all of human history here. Well, Professor Jiang's answer is that the AI needs to understand what really, fundamentally makes us tick. And his theory is that at our core, we aren't driven by big abstract ideas like liberalism or whatever. It's much simpler than that. He says we are all just looking for 3 basic things: structure in our lives, a sense of meaning, and a feeling of purpose. And those fundamental needs, structure, meaning, purpose, they show up in our actions. They translate into 3 things we all do. We love, we create, and we grow. According to Jiang, this is the magic formula for a happy, fulfilled life. The ancient Greeks actually had a word for this, eudaimonia. It's that idea of genuine human flourishing.
So,
The big takeaway here is that an AI for predicting history can't just be about crunching numbers on economies or military strength. No way. It would have to actually model what he calls the human heart. The entire theory boils down to this. If a society lets its people love, create, and grow, that society will prosper. But if it crushes those basic human needs, it's destined to collapse. It's as simple and as complicated as that.
But, and you knew there had to be a but, right? Here's the massive catch. Professor Jiang says that even if we could build a perfect AI model of the human heart, there's a fundamental flaw, a critical weakness that affects every single AI system out there.
He uses a really great analogy, self-driving cars. Think about it. You can program a car to handle traffic, right? To avoid accidents, to drive in the rain. But what's the one thing, the one variable you can never fully account for?
The answer? It's called the edge case. It's that 1 in a million event, the thing so weird and unpredictable it's completely outside the model's training data. For the self-driving car, the edge case is the person who wants to cause a crash on purpose. An algorithm it can't compute that. And in the grand story of human history, this edge case has a name. We call it the Great Man Theory. These are those individuals who just seem to pop up and completely change the game. Think of a Julius Caesar or a Homer whose stories shaped a civilization, or maybe even a modern figure like Putin. They step outside the normal flow of history and bend it to their will. They're the ultimate wild card that no model can predict.
So where does that leave us? Does this whole great man problem mean that predicting the future is just impossible?
Well, according to Professor Jing, not necessarily, but it does mean this isn't some weekend project. This is a massive, massive undertaking. How massive? He estimates that to build a real, working psychohistory AI, and not just a black box, but one that's open and transparent so we can understand it, would take somewhere between 50 and 100 years. I mean, think about the collaboration required. Historians, mathematicians, programmers, all working together for generations. And that really brings us right back to where we started with that Dante quote. What this whole explainer really gets at is that, yeah, a perfect prediction machine might be 100 years away, but the power to imagine a better future, the will to, as Dante said, fight for it, that's something we have right here, right now. So maybe the most important question isn't what an AI will tell us about our future. Maybe it's what kind of future we're going to start building for ourselves today.